At this point, I'd invite General Grass, General Cadavy, and General Clark to the podium. Sir? Thanks, sir. You did a great job. Sir, good to see you. Whoops, want to dance? We're going to spend this last few minutes. I know we're running a little behind, but I think this is time well spent. If we run a little bit over, we run a little bit over. You'll just have to dress really fast to get back to the reception this evening. So we're spending a little time with our leaders, our National Guard Bureau leaders. And what I think the Chief's going to kick us off with a video and some comments. And Chief, I'm going to let you run this show. So no stranger to any of us, our Chief, General Frank Grass.
Well, thank you. Thank you, General Ashenhurst. First of all, let me just say thanks to Chief of Staff of the Army on his comments. I think he was very serious. You know, we've been together for a few weeks here, but I've known him since he was a one-star. And when he says he's committed to looking at it, he is already doing that. And so I really thank him for taking time out of his very busy schedule to be here today. What I wanted to do, and I know I'm kind of up against the clock, but I wanted to just take a few minutes here and spend a little time talking about what I see from the Guard today, and with my two partners here, the Director of the Air Guard and the Director of the Army Guard. And hopefully we'll have time to answer a few questions. First thing I want to do, though, is I want to recognize today those that served in the Vietnam era. You know, it was 50 years ago the Vietnam War started, 40 years ago it ended. So if you served in the Vietnam era, please stand so we can give you a round of applause. Thank you so much, and I will tell you, for all of you, especially for our younger warriors, Army and Air, if you get an opportunity to participate in one of the commemorative events, please do that. I've had a chance to do that, and it is such a critical part of the healing that goes on for our warriors. The next thing I wanted to do is, across the audience is about 35 of our Title X Active Guard Reserve that we brought with us this year. The last few years we've held back quite a bit, primarily because of the budget issues. But I wanted to turn the lights up, and I told them specifically, you set with your state today. So go ahead and stand up if you came from NGB. And part of the reason I do that, and my staff will tell you, that I do not go by and talk to someone or have them sit in a meeting with me at NGB without asking them what state they're from, because I think it is so much about who we are. You don't have to be parochial about your state. In fact, you better not be if you're at National Guard Bureau. But you definitely ought to be proud of where you're from, what units you've served with, and your adjutant general, and the men and women that serve in your state. So that's why we scattered them around the crowd here. I know they were having a great time because a couple of them hit me with some candy a while ago. So they were out there throwing. The first thing I would like to do, a little video here that was put together by a couple of NCOs and a major back at NGB. This production that they did, I think it tells you a lot about the Guard. The first part is kind of a message from me about the future. And then the second part gets into what's really happening out there. And I've been to 49 states now, 12 countries. I know that the directors have both been out and about, and this is the best National Guard I've seen since I enlisted in 1969. No doubt about it. And anybody in this video that you see when we get to the back half of that could be anybody in this crowd or any one of the 455,000 National Guardsmen across the map. Go ahead and show the video.
We are living in a time where opportunities abound. The information age, a global economy, and the ease of transportation has created a society where borders no longer exist. With these opportunities, however, are challenges that we must confront. We are living in a pivotal time in history where the actions we take now will set the course for future generations. The challenges facing the National Guard, indeed the entire Department of Defense, are what I call the three realities. These realities will shape our security environment going forward. The first is our global reality. Asymmetric actors, cyber terrorists, pandemics, transnational organized crime, regional instability, and climate change are among the many threats that we must confront for the foreseeable future. The second I call fiscal reality. It requires us to balance the need to keep Americans safe against budgetary constraints and rising debt. Intertwined with these realities is the reality of change. Never in our history has our security environment changed so rapidly. At the same time, technology and access to information from mass and social media has created an environment where the American people expect far more from their government and at greater speed than ever before. As I contemplate these challenges, how can the National Guard help address these global, fiscal, and change realities? First, as the primary combat reserve of the Army and Air Force, and after nearly 14 years of sustained conflict, the Guard has transformed into a premier operational force. Second, as the military force of choice in times of domestic crisis, we are based in nearly every zip code and can respond rapidly to any man-made or natural disaster with overwhelming capability. Finally, we all know how important trust can be. We have established long-standing local, state, federal, and global relationships that equate to long-standing partnerships. Built on trust, these partnerships have paid huge dividends in addressing crisis at home and abroad. For the Department of Defense and the nation, it is more critical than ever to sustain an operational National Guard in order to face today's realities.
I am General Frank Grass. For nearly 4 centuries, your National Guard, armed with the authorities signed into the Constitution by our forefathers, continue to do 3 missions extremely well. We fight America's wars, we respond in the homeland, and we provide partnerships both abroad as well as at home. We do all that because of the great men and women who serve in the Army and Air National Guard. We are your National Guard. I think the NCOs and the Major did a good job for us. So the real message there is all about our warfight mission, our homeland mission, and our partnerships. And you see it in that moniker that just appeared on the screen there at the end. And I wanted to just take a moment and hit on a few of the high points of each one of those missions. And I put this in here. This was a picture taken within the last year in a visit to Kandahar, Afghanistan. This is actually a unit that I enlisted in 1969. And I look back at that, and I think about what a strategic reserve was. And if I go back to the early 1970s, coming out of basic training in AIT, and I talked to one of my sergeants at the time, how much time will I have to get ready if we have to go to the war with the Soviet Union at that time, or if we get shipped over, to Vietnam? And he goes, oh, you'll have a year, don't worry about it. Because we were carrying M1s in 1969, 1970 in the National Guard. Most of our engineer equipment was built during the Korean War. Then spin this forward. This is the second deployment of this unit. The young leaders, there was only one guy there, and he wasn't deployed at that time. He was back at home station. They actually had served when I was there, when I was a company commander, and he remembered me. Only one, but I will tell you, these men and women, they are truly an operational reserve every day, whether it's in the homeland, back in Missouri, or deployed overseas, and every state has these stories. So I have now seen what I think an operational reserve looks like, and I wouldn't have told you this 3 years ago, but as we go forward and we work with General Milley, as we work with General Welsh, the Army and Air National Guard will never go back to a strategic reserve. Go to the next slide. Warfight. You heard General Milley talk about, should we have 2 rotations at NTC, 2 rotations at JRTC. I was just out there, saw the 116th Brigade and all those subordinate elements in 22 states. And I'll tell you what, you bring that team together and you put them on the battlefield out there in that training environment. That is one of our most ready brigades today, as well as the unit that went to JRTC this year. I believe it was 1st of the 34th. So I think we got to get more into this. We're sending 8,000 Guard and Reservists this year, not counting the rotation, to prepare for the warfight. They're supporting enablers. They're supporting the OPFOR. We got to do more of that to maintain that operational edge in the National Guard. And NTC, JRTC, our XCTC programs get us there. And oh, by the way, if we can take our Air Guard partners with us, or we can participate in Southern Strike, Northern Strike, you name the operation that we can do with our Air Guard partners, we will all be much better for the future. Go to the next slide. This is a picture of our foundational missions, which I think we definitely can help the Army with. Kosovo, the Sinai Desert. You name the mission out there right now, a reassurance of our NATO partners, many are state partners right now, and we can do those missions and we can help the Army, because a lot of our active brothers and sisters right now, those brigades need to be focused on fighting the night as a brigade every day. We don't know when something might happen. I mean, immediately we've got to have those active brigades out the door, ready to pump into a division and a corps and fight tonight, and we will be shortly behind them there. So I think there's a lot of opportunities of the future. I'm much more optimistic than I was 2 years ago. Tim can talk about the $18 million I think we'll get in ERI money for Europe next year. The Air Force has already tapped into the ERI account for the Air National Guard. Pat and I were down when Buddy Titshaw and Gretchen retired here not that long ago in April, and we saw 6 of the F-15s out of Jacksonville, Florida, and 6 of the F-15s out of Portland. They deployed. They're doing 90-day rotations. 12 jets. Jacksonville fell on them. They went into the Netherlands. They've been all over Europe, reassuring our NATO partners. We can do that mission to support our Air Force. And it will make us much more ready when called to the warfight. So we have to maintain that edge. Go to the next slide. In the homeland, as you heard, General Ashenhurst mentioned, I counted up the number of operations on my domestic operations slide this morning, 26 ongoing domestic operations. That's been about the average all summer because of fires, because of drought, because of security concerns that some states have. So those types of missions you do every day, seamless. This morning we're about 5,600 guardsmen in the homeland on state active duty, on Title 32. This weekend there's 12 civil support teams engaged somewhere protecting the American people, ready to be called in by first responders. So your homeland mission baseline today is about 5,000. That includes air control alert at about 14 sites across the nation, where our air guardsmen, our maintainers, our tanker pilots, they set alert 24/7 so that if anyone ever decides they want to fly into a building in the United States of America and kill Americans, we're going to be prepared to take them out of the sky before that happens. 99% of that mission is done by the Air National Guard every day. It's about 1,000 troops. Very quietly, they do that mission. Go to the next slide. And here's a sample of one of the units. Now, I highlighted this unit, but many of our units right now that are setting alert are coming under a new threat, a new concern. And it happens to be bear bombers, blackjacks, that are coming up along our border. 4th of July, 142nd out of Oregon takes off, and they go out and greet a bear bomber 39 nautical miles off the coast of the United States, on the West Coast. We got to be ready. We got to let them know, hey, we're watching. You're not going to get that close to the United States of America without being greeted by an Air National Guard fighter and a tanker right behind him. Go to the next slide. And then we have our missile defense program. You know, we've been in that business now for over 10 years. Alaska, Colorado, California. This is the first line of defense from an inbound ICBM to the United States. And if you haven't seen it, you get a chance to go out and see these men and women. These are captains, these are sergeants sitting at the panel 24/7, ready to launch a ground-based interceptor and an inbound ICBM. And it wasn't that long ago we had a very successful flight test. And you know who was on the phone at NORTHCOM talking to the NORTHCOM commander? Was a major from the Army National Guard. You know who was on the panel pushing the button, flipping the switches so that the computer on board that ground-based interceptor could decide when it was going to shoot that drone, not drone, but that object coming at it? Those were guardsmen, captains, sergeants in the National Guard. Another great homeland mission we do every day. Go to the next slide. The last mission, and I'll get off the stage here so we can get to questions. Partnerships. I can't say enough things about the partnerships. You know, this summer we signed 2 new partnerships. Djibouti, I think General Tanini, when we were there and he signed the partnership, I didn't think he was ever going to get back to Kentucky. They were going to keep him, I think. And he's got a big event starting this weekend with about 23 of the top leaders of Djibouti coming back to Kentucky. And I know the Kentucky Guard will show them a great time. Massachusetts signed up. They are now partnering with Kenya. That partnership, believe it or not, when we went through the whole process with the tags, with the committees, making recommendations to the Department of Defense and to the Department of State, we were told that this was very important to the President of the United States. This was a strategic initiative and not to mention it until after his visit in July. And we said, that's great. Can you imagine a state partnership that was started by many of these folks right here in this row 23 years ago that now is being used as a strategic tool by the President of the United States? That's pretty phenomenal. And I want to thank these men and women right here in this row. Thank you. So we're up to 76 state partners. Many states have 2. Some have 3. Some call up. They call the adjutant general when something's happening in Eastern Europe, or something's happening in Africa, or there's been a disaster in Central America. They call up the adjutant general before they call anyone else, and they ask for advice because they've built this long-standing trust and confidence in each other. And just in the last week and a half now, Michigan and Texas teamed up together to fly the first ever Reapers, Air National Guard, over the country of Latvia. Now, if you don't think that Chief of Defense, he told me, he says, I'm sending a Christmas card to Putin. He'll probably put that Reaper on that Christmas card. but it's all about these partnerships that are really moving us forward as a nation. The money this year was a low. The overhead of this program isn't very much money in the big scheme. As your member of the JCS, I have the opportunity now to challenge above the services when the money's not there. And it's not the services problem because their budgets are getting cut. But I want the Secretary of Defense to know what's happening to his state partnership program. So I laid an issue paper on to the Deputy Secretary. You send it in about a 2 or 3 day period before. He looks at it, and then you come into the room and you get a chance to brief the Secretary and the Vice Chairman on your issue. And we're talking about the budget for 2017. And I said, Mr. Secretary, we're underfunded in state partnership programs. You know, we hit a high in 2014 of 700 events, engagements we did through our adjutants general and our states with those partners. And I said, I'm very concerned at a time when we need to continue to be engaged and this very small pot of money is being cut. He goes, Frank, I read your paper. He says, we're going to accept it as a bill. He says, I can't tell you where it'll rank, but he says, we are going to accept it as a bill. My vice was sitting there. He wanted to yank me out of the room. I said, oh, no, wait a minute. I want to get some more things on the table since he's in agreement here. But I will tell you that it ranked very high. And when we see the 17 resource management decisions, I think we'll all be very pleased because your partnerships that you have created out there are telling the story. Your partnered countries are telling the story back at the Pentagon for us. So thank you so much. Go to the next slide. Other partnerships are critical. This just happens to be Boston and Massachusetts. And you see the guardsmen there. And that was during the Boston bombings. And the relationship that Catfish Rights built early on with the commissioners and others in Boston made this seamless. The partnerships that you build with parishes, with counties, with cities, no one else can do that. And you can't wait till the disaster strikes to try to explain that. In the last few weeks, I visited the Cal Fires in California, and then I went up to Washington and went up and talked to some of the regional incident commanders. And they just didn't meet in this fire season. They have known each other for a number of years. And one of the young firemen that's stationed in central Washington right now, he's a fireman in a county there. He said, hey, I know these guys, and he says, I'm certifying them for the first time for the highest levels of entering a fire zone. And you know, most of our folks, we get level 1. He certified them level 2. He says, I am very comfortable that your folks know how to do this business. And now we want to try to figure out how every year we can have them prepared, only because of the partnerships you build with your communities. And go to the last slide here. Partnerships in, how many people have, I think, 35 youth challenge programs now? And I think there's some more coming our way. We've graduated 131,000 at-risk youth since the program started, and it's going strong. If you haven't been to a graduation, and I know many of you have, but it's very inspiring to go talk to those young men and women that we've given them an opportunity in their lives to get ahead. And I think one of them that stands out to me right now is a Lieutenant JG in the Coast Guard who was a dropout of high school. And he went ahead and got through the Youth Challenge program, got his high school diploma, and got accepted to the Coast Guard Academy. That's pretty phenomenal, and there are hundreds of stories out there like that. So I applaud that partnership. We got to do that, and I know there's some outstanding support here in the room today, especially among our senior statesmen. We just had an opportunity to present an award to the DC Guard. General McKinley was there at National Stadium, and across the nation, that program is being recognized more and more as a need to fill a gap in our education program in the United States of America. Go to the next slide. So, what's my message to you for the future? And I've got a few thoughts here that I think each one of you need to be aware of. If you look at the slide with the purple bubbles on it, population in the United States, early 1950s, 120 million. Projections, about 330 million by 2019. If you look over across to the right, Homeland Response, The United States of America, the citizens expect you to respond faster than you ever have before. If you go back to the 1900s, early 1900s, people took care of themselves. They had to because they didn't have anyone. We have created a whole society that expects somebody will be there. And if you're not there, a news channel will be, and they'll be telling a bad story about our first responders, about our National Guard and our military being able to take care of people in the homeland. So I think the expectation is so much higher today than it's ever been that we're going to be there when disaster strikes, and you are. You're doing that. On the lower side there, uncertain security environment. The same expectation in the homeland is being lived out today, and you heard some of that earlier, in the security environment of the world. The world expects us to be there. I had a chief of defense one day tell me that he says, you know, you talk about cutting budgets and reducing your readiness and bringing down the size of your force. He goes, if you want your children and your grandchildren to live the way you do in the United States of America, he says, you can't let that happen. He said, because no one else will step up to the challenge. And I thought about it for a minute, and I thought about the Ebola virus. The international community was in there. But who came in with the military to help establish? I mean, the Kentucky Guard was in Senegal opening the airfield. It was a task force out of the U.S. military that went in to help create the containment facilities that would get control of that. What was the first action when the Russians moved into Ukraine and Crimea? Well, I think it was California, last time I checked with the Ukrainians. They were talking already. What are we going to do? It was Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland all saying, hey, tags, we need you over here. And we did deploy. Pennsylvania deployed some strikers on a West Virginia aircraft. We are going to be needed quicker than we ever have been before. And it's not just about partners. It's about the Air Force and Army getting smaller. And they will need us faster. At the same time, the American people are going to need us faster here in the homeland. Now, the bottom line of that is on that lower right side. 1955, we went back and looked at some of the numbers. The Army and Air National Guard in 1955, you can see it, 419,000. Under full sequestration in 2019, the National Guard will be back about where it was in 1955. And oh, by the way, the expectations are much higher and the population has doubled. Quite a story that we got to keep telling, because you got to put this into reality for your elected officials so they know what's happening to our nation. Go to the last slide. Just a few thoughts for the future. I know that last slide's a bit gloomy for most of us, but I would tell you in the 3 years I've been in serving as your chief, I couldn't say enough good things about my relationship with the Air Force. Mark Welch, you know, he and I both will be retiring within about a year. And he told me one day, he said, you know, this wasn't easy. He said, I had to set the mindset of the Air Force because they were in a Cold War culture about that Guard. And he says, we can't have that. We can't accept that. Whether we want to or not doesn't make a difference anymore. We're so small, 54 fighter squadrons. That includes active Guard reserve. He goes, we got to continue to work together. And I told the staff, you will put money in 12304, and we will deploy the Air National Guard, and we'll put cyber in the Guard, and we're probably going to push some more engineers, and we're going to figure out what else can we put into the Guard that we can get when we need it and still have what we need on active duty. He says, we got to find the right balance. And then the last thing he said to me in that conversation was, he says, you and I got to talk. He said, Secretary James, she's going to be here tomorrow, I believe, outstanding leader. When Mark Welch leaves, who backfills him? When Sid Clark leaves, when Frank Grass leaves, and someday Tim Catavy, when we all leave, how are we going to build the future leadership of the Department of Defense that truly understands there are three components in the Air Force? And I said, Mark, we're going to work this together. We're going to make this happen because it's best for the United States of America. On the Army side, I think you've heard today, a tremendous engagement. I've known Mark Milley since he was a one-star. One of my trips to Afghanistan to visit our troops, he had a number of our troops committed in combat in the southeast. And as I went into his office in Kabul, he closed the door. He was a 3-star Corps commander. He cleared off his coffee table, said, "You want something to drink?" And of course, he is kind of funny at times, a few jokes here and there. He lays out a map of Pakistan and Afghanistan. He goes, "So I want to show you what's happening here today." And I was trying to figure out at first, why was he taking this time with me? I mean, I knew where our forces were, and he was showing me that, but why would he take time? And then it suddenly hit me at that point, is he was educating me and respecting me as a member of the JCS, because he knew I was going back as one of the 7 voting members. So I have great hope that we're going to build a tremendous relationship. I told the commission on the future of the Army that they shouldn't just look at past relationships or past actions that have occurred to reduce, our proposals to reduce the types of equipment or the types of units or the size of the force. Don't just look at that. Look at what sequestration is going to do to your military, to your ground force in the next 10 to 20 years. And I think the answer is very clear of what we got to do. So with that, I think we're going to be able to answer a few questions, but let me just close. Please thank your families, for the spouses, for the families that are here today. Thank you for your great support. For the employers, for the industrial base, please stay with us. We're going to need you more and more. And thank you for being 0.55% of the population that serves in uniform today.
Are you ready for questions, sir? You ready? The mic should be live. This is your chance.
General Grass, this is Chief Retired Jelinski Hall. It's good to see you again, sir. Thanks for all that you do for our country and our National Guard. As we remember and reflect on the day's events of September 11th, 2001, based on your discussions with the President, Secretary of Defense, Joint Chiefs of Staff, and other Homeland Defense agencies, how confident are you in our nation's current state of preparedness?
Well, Chief, thanks first for serving as actually for General McKinley, and then coming over and getting me started up there as the chief. And I know we had some great trips together there right before you retired. Please tell Gary hi. And I also have to say that anybody in the audience, if you want to see Chief Jelinski Hall's history, go down to the Women's Museum. She's got a great display there for the National Guard and for one of the women that really cut the edge for our military. Let me talk about your question for just a second. I think what keeps me up at night is a disaster of a magnitude we have never experienced in this nation, and it could happen at any time. You all have gotten extremely, extremely good at responding to the regional disasters. I mean, I tell folks all the time, I tell the chairman, I said, "Hey, I'm going to give you this information about the fires out west," but I said, I have nothing to do with it. You know, I'm lucky enough to get to go out and see the great work and see the men and women that volunteer to do this and see their leadership within their state. And you can have Army and Air working side by side, and it doesn't make a bit of difference no matter what the disaster is. And I said, I don't have to do anything, which is great. That's the way it should be. The Adjutant General and the Governor and EMAC will fill in all the gaps. You know, most of the summer we had anywhere from 500 to 2,100 firemen and guardsmen doing fire duty out of about 8 different states, and they were working in 5 states. Again, NGB didn't need to do anything at all, and that's the way it should be. Ramp that up though to something on the scale of an 8.0 earthquake occurring in the Hayward Fault, Oakland Bay, or the Cascadia subduction zone, and we're building a playbook for that out in Oregon, or Washington State, and a 50-foot tidal wave hitting the Outer Banks and coming in through Seattle. What does that look like in a disaster today? And it'll take every soldier, sailor, airman, Marines to save lives when one of those worst nights in America occurs. And are we ready for that? Are our active brothers and sisters and the reserves ready for that, to fall in under a dual status command? Will they know how to respond? Will they know who they work for? Have they rehearsed it? You all do. You do it all the time. But I think those large-scale disasters, we've got a lot of work to do. Our J5 has been spending quite a bit of time And Secretary Carter has been very interested in this from the time he was a deputy secretary about regional planning. What do you need in the states for those worst nights in America? And part of what we've done is we now have 54 state plans that we have visibility of what you plan for. And the next step now is pushing those into a regional perspective and building it just like a TIBFID and looking at when do you need them there. And I've met with Craig Fugate several times on this. He says, hey, if you're not there with the right forces within 72 hours, you're into consequence management and you're no longer saving lives. So you've got to be there. Okay, so now let's build the disasters and let's rehearse those disasters as some states are already getting full speed ahead on. And let's take that and let's take the lift and figure out how much lift do we need to do that. And oh, by the way, what if we're in the middle of a contingency overseas? We've never been able to get to that level, and it has been a major undertaking. We started it about 3 years ago. I thought could knock it out in 2. It's about a 4 to 6 year event to get to those kind of plans. But your folks are doing some great work, and that is my biggest concern in the homeland. If one of those things, New Madrid, you name it, happens tonight, it'll be pretty devastating, and we'll need every service to be responding and assisting our first responders and our governors.
Sir, Lieutenant Colonel Clayton Kettemeyer from Illinois. The topic came up earlier about increasing the employment of the National Guard to meet combatant commander requirements. And my question is, what can we do more in the National Guard and particularly at the Bureau to communicate our availability to meet those combatant commander requirements and engage at the Army staff, combatant commander staff, and particularly the joint staff during the sourcing process that can engage us and allow us to be considered for those types of operational requirements.
Let me, I'll ask General Clark and General Cadavy to comment in just a second, but let me start off by saying that we are echoing that. I think you heard some of that today. You know, Mark Welch has directed that money be put into 12304 Bravo, which will give him access. When we were dealing with this budget in 16, we didn't have the access yet to get money into the pot for the Army. We will in the future. I think by 17, we will get some money into 12304 Bravo, which will give us access. And if you boil this down, the Army will need us. The Air Force needs us now. The Army will need us in the future. And when you look at the number of deployments right now, what are they? They're platoons. They're companies. They're battalions. We have accessibility to them right now if we had the money. So what should the Guard be doing? Should we be doing these foundational missions? Kosovo, the Sinai, security in the Horn of Africa, continued follow-on missions in Afghanistan, Kuwait. I mean, we're doing every mission out there. We are on those missions today. So I think we just keep echoing that and we get the money in the right pots because the laws are written to get access to mobilize the force. We have things today we never had on 9/11 on accessibility. So we get the money right and we'll be there.
You know, for the Air National Guard, I would tell you it's not just the 12304B. That's money after the fact. It's the money that the Air Force puts into the Air National Guard before the fact. That's why we have the number of full-timers we have, the training that we do, the inspections that we take, the standards that we meet. Our mobilization stations are where we live. These units that General Grass is talking about, when they fly into Europe, they fly into Europe ready to fight. And they leave at the last moment at the notice, no problem. And that's the way the Air Force has built their National Guard. So it's all that money and investment they put up front that makes 12304B so easy to use on the backside of what we do. It's a model that senior leadership of the Air Force created years ago to make sure that we were a seamless partner that jumped into it. My biggest concern, we've gotten too good at what we do. That's a little bit odd to say, but I got to tell you that as the Air Force starts to get smaller, they start leaning on the National Guard harder. It's going to be tough because I don't want to break the balance with families, civilian employers. We're just very good at what we do. And I know I'm boasting here, but I got to tell you, the Air Force leans on us with no hesitation whatsoever, all the time. And that money that they put up in the front part of it makes all the difference in how it gets exercised later in like 12304B or 12302 or 12301D or any other pot of money that mobilizes the Guard.
Well, from the Army National Guard standpoint, I think we're all tracking that the named mission opportunities have reduced as we reduced our footprints in Afghanistan, a little bit of growth in Iraq, I think everybody's tracking. Those type of things don't bother me because the money is there through OCO to generate the readiness, but there's just not the opportunities that there once were. So 12304 Bravo is kind of our way to continue to operationally use the Army National Guard. And I think it's about access, it's about funding, and it's about readiness. I think 12304 Bravo is the right authority for the access. Now it's about the funding. You heard General Milley, he's taken a good hard look with the Army staff, and the Army National Guard is decisively engaged, ensuring that there's the funding to ensure that access. I think the Army National Guard, who has been deeply involved in Kosovo and MFO for the last 14 years, I think we ought to own that mission and continue to provide the forces. And then I think as you look at AFRICOM, EUCOM, SOUTHCOM, PACOM, through their Army service components, I think if we were given adequate 12304 Bravo, we could assist with building partnership capacity through the operational deployment training, our ODTs, engagements, and then also involvement in joint exercises and service exercises.
If I could come back to your question too about accessibility and what do we need to do, think about this. On 9/11, we probably had 2,500 guardsmen mobilized. That was a big deal for us at that time because we were rotating units in the Balkans, into Desert Spring, in Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. This year, we've averaged every day 10,000 Army and Air Guardsmen deployed. Every day. I look at the report every morning. We've averaged 10,000 deployed overseas. Not to mention when we hit 6,000 deployed in the homeland one day. And I think we're pretty operational. Can we go higher? My one concern, yes, we can go higher, but just as we were talking with General Milley earlier, and for General Welsh as well, is there a breaking point? What is that? I go out and I talk to men and women across the Guard. 40% of the men and women I talk to, and Chief Brush is there with me, they say, hey, we haven't deployed. We expect to deploy. When we signed up, we expected that we will be going somewhere. So we got to find that right balance in there. But I think we're going to see those missions begin to increase based on what I've heard in the last 3 or 4 months now back in the Pentagon. Any more? Can I ask one question then? As a 4-star, I guess I can. That's okay. Good. Everyone that has deployed overseas in a mobilization status, please stand up. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Now, everyone that has deployed overseas in a training status, please stand up. In the last, in your career. Yeah, career. Okay. And one last question. Everyone that has deployed in the homeland, state active duty, Title 32, please stand up. Pretty good. Thank you. I think that proves right there that we're a pretty operational National Guard today, and we will continue to be.